Alrighty. Welcome everyone to the daily market wrap, the biggest charts in 30 minutes. My name is David Zimmerman. I'm the founder of DeFi University, and we're going to be going through a couple of charts here this evening. Why don't we go ahead and start things off with ETH today? I think during the session, ETH, I don't think it broke 1900. I think it got pretty close, but wasn't able to quite break 1900. Yeah, it looks like it did. It did just briefly get down below 1900. Looks like the low of the day was 1887. Now, even if we get a little bit of a bounce here out of ETH over the weekend, I think that would be great because I'd probably get filled on those calls that I want to sell, those short calls. Um, but in my opinion, if we zoom out here on ETH to a daily, and then, just take a look at the moving averages. Like the 200-day moving average is like, what is that, 1,500 points higher? Nothing good ever happens below the 200-day moving average. And if we zoom out and take a look at the 200-week moving average, well, we're still trading well below that 200-week, which comes in here at 2,400. So, and this big wick on this candle makes me think that ETH could be about to just dump down to maybe 16 or 12, something like that over the next couple of weeks. That really would not surprise me because when I take a look around at all of the other digital assets that I track, they all look like crap. I mean, they really do. They all look like shit. And Bitcoin is the highest quality digital asset, and even it is solidly in bear market mode. And I don't think we've seen anything yet. In my opinion, here, if we just measure from peak to trough, it would not surprise me for Bitcoin to have a 75% drawdown from peak to trough this bear cycle. So that would bring Bitcoin all the way down to $32,000. Can you believe it? $32,000 for Bitcoin seems almost unbelievable. But I think it's definitely possible because that would be just a normal bear market correction for Bitcoin. This is what Bitcoin does. Bitcoin puts in an 8x from trough to peak and then corrects by 75%, and then rinse, wash, repeat, repeats the cycle all over again. So from trough to peak, this bull cycle, Bitcoin put in a 7x. Just think about that, a 7x from trough to peak this past bull cycle just by holding Bitcoin and doing nothing. So the trick with this asset is just to buy it and hold it for 5 years. And make sure that you buy it, during a bear market. So buy it during a bear market, hold it for 5 years, and do nothing. That's really the trick with Bitcoin here. So, for me, taking a look here at BTC, the 200-week moving average comes in. Let me grab my arrow tool. This 200-week moving average, it comes in right now at 58K. And if this bear market cycle is no different than previous bear market cycles, well, then I think we should almost expect Bitcoin to move down into the 30s. That's almost what should be the expectation. If Bitcoin could move this cycle is no different than previous cycles, then a 75% correction is normal. It might sound scary, but it's could be normal. So if Bitcoin makes a move down to 32 or 33K, something like that, well, then what does that mean for alts? Well, for ETH, it would likely mean, at least $1,000 ETH, maybe even 900 or lower. If we take a look at Sol, that would likely mean for Solana, $30 Solana, all the way down here, $30 Sol at least, but probably much lower because Solana is a much lower quality digital asset. So, and this pattern here is pretty bearish. This is a bear flag, just like this was a bear flag. And, we got a little bit of a bounce here, but couldn't even make it up to 95. So Sol, I'm short Sol again, and I'm expecting this to move down to 30 bucks. And it could do so quickly, especially if the stock market really starts to correct here in earnest. So this is S&P futures. And this horizontal is what I'm watching for S&P futures. This is on a weekly. Let's go ahead and take a look. You've got this 200-week moving average down below. I want to remove that. Let's take a look at the 50. The 50-week moving average on the S&P comes in at 6,400 on the futures. So, I really do think that we've been so long in the tooth, this rally from those April 2025 tariff tantrum lows for the S&P. It's time for some vol to re-enter. Now, as we're seeing private credit blow up, and we're seeing software blow up, and we're seeing all of these different tech companies, with Block being the most famous of them yesterday, announcing that, hey, we're going to just fire half of our staff. So, what happens if, and what did the stock do? Well, they fired half their staff, and the stock this week was plus 20%. So, what happens if, every other tech company follows suit? Well, you might actually end up with stocks that push higher, but it's going to be really hard to see the indexes push higher if you've got massive unemployment. That fear, I think, will spook investors, and they'll dump shares even if those companies start to become much, much more efficient. Um, but that would probably be just a phenomenal buying opportunity. I mean, if we take a look at last year, that turned out to be a phenomenal buying opportunity. The entire bear market of 2022, that turned out to be a phenomenal buying opportunity, especially if you were able to wait to buy until the end of 2022. So, what will we see in 2026? Likely a break of this level of support at 22 and a half on the NASDAQ, and potentially, even a move down to 20,000. So that's kind of what I'm looking for this year out of the NASDAQ. Let's take a look at the Russell. So the Russell has a level of trend line support here that might get tested next week. And then we've got that horizontal, that was the old all-time high. The 50-week moving average comes in a little bit lower. So this index is made up of lower quality names. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see this trade down to its 50-week moving average. Here's the VIX. This is the volatility index for, just S&P front month futures. And this is actually the tradable version of VIX. So VIX you can trade options on. VX is priced based on VIX options, which themselves track premiums the cash index, the at the money cash index options, SPX. So when we see VX push higher, that's a pretty good indication that we're going to start to see, a little bit more, maybe a little bit more volatility out of the stock market. Now, something that I've been tracking quite a bit is the MOVE index. And the MOVE index is a measure of bond market volatility. Now, this is a weekly. And this volatility that we've seen out of MOVE, I mean, that is a lot of vol. Look at that. So we might be about to see, just a big move out of the S&P to the downside. This has been extremely inversely correlated with the S&P. And take a look at that. That looks like we might be in for a big move lower come Monday out of the S&P. Let me just go ahead and throw the S&P cash index over top of the MOVE index. And you can see here, they have been extremely tightly inversely correlated for the last year and a half or so. And hey, you know what? MOVE is pushing higher, which on this chart means that the S&P, which is this blue line, could be about to just really move sharply lower. So be prepared for some real volatility come next week. Here's the S&P cash index. And this is the daily. We're just kind of distributing up at the all-time highs. But if MOVE is any indication of what's to come next week, we could be about to see a sharp move to the downside. Here's VIX, VIX. It pushed up to 21 earlier in the session today, gave it all back. Volatility is mean reverting, but we have noticed a trend here. This trend is we put in the lows in vol and DEAS 25. So December last year, what has volatility done since then? It has tracked higher. So all we need is a breakout in vol up above 30, and that will be, likely if we get up into the 50s, that would probably mark a local low in equities, which might even be viable. Let's take a look at some of those equities. Here's Tesla. And Tesla, since it broke its respective level of trendline support, it was able to get rejected on the retest and push lower. So Tesla's got horizontal support here. Let me just go ahead and draw this in. So that horizontal support comes in at roughly 382. If that fails, then this is just wide open. So Tesla could move sharply lower. Here's Google. This has been one of the outperformers here of the AI crowd. And if we just take a look, Google has this level of horizontal support. It's got above this level of trend line resistance and the 50-day moving average, which acted as resistance. So Google, one of the outperformers. NVIDIA, oh man, NVIDIA got smoked after earnings, really just phenomenal results and excellent guidance. And yet the market just, sold it. So if that is what we have to look forward to, one of the highest quality names in the AI space getting sold after reporting phenomenal results, well, then if it makes a move down to 172 and breaks it, watch for 150, 152, 153, something like that to hold as the next level of support. And, this has already been a really big move. From peak to trough, it's already off 10% in just the last 48 hours, the last two sessions after reporting. So if NVIDIA makes a move down to 153, that would be a 22% move. That's a correction. So I'm looking for a correction out of the NASDAQ here. Now, Microsoft, this is a big software name, and Microsoft just barely, trying to hold support, but unable to do so. The next level of support for Microsoft is 345. And a move down to 345 from peak to trough, that would be a 37% correction out of Microsoft this over the last couple of months here. So software getting sold. Apple, AAPL, this has been one of the outperformers, but in just the last session today, off 3.2% and unable to break out above this little bit of trend line resistance here. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. So we've got this horizontal support just a couple of dollars below, but I think a better target for Apple is its respective trend line support down here at maybe $200. So from peak to trough, if it makes it down to 200, that would be a 32% correction. So in line with kind of what I'm expecting out of the generals of the NASDAQ. And these, don't make any mistake about it, these are the NASDAQ generals. Here's Amazon. AMZN, just waiting for the chart of Amazon to load for us here. Looks like it wants to freeze up. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at this trend line support. So this level of trend line support here, this looks like a flag to me, but the flag with the gaps is a little bit unclean. It's just not a very clean pattern, but it still is a flag. It looks like a bear flag. And that, portends a move in Amazon down to 160. Let me just go ahead and draw that in so we can see this. Here's the pole, and here's the flag. So if this confirms, it would mean a move down to 160 out of Amazon. And so just like all the others, that would be from peak to trough, a move of, 36, 37%. So that's what I'm looking for out of Amazon, a move down to 162. Let's take a look here at Meta, META, and this stock. So Meta, these guys have started to borrow, just like Oracle, in order to get a bigger piece of that AI data center build out. And the revenues from that seem to be dubious. So Meta getting punished for borrowing, sitting near trend line support. If or when this fails, watch out, because a move down to 485 could be imminent. And that would be a 38% correction from peak to trough, in line with all the rest of the generals. The only problem for Meta is that if it gets down to 483, 485 down here, well, it better hold, because there's no support down here. This is just a big no man's land. And support for Meta would come in, quite a bit lower than 485 if that were to fail. Maybe 412, something like that. So yeah, trouble for Meta. Let's take a look at Oracle, big software player. And is putting in what looks to me to be a dead cat bounce here. So this week got the dead cat bounce. Same with IGV, the software ETF, and starting to turn back around and give it back. So this level of long-term support needs to hold for Oracle. But if the other generals, continue to move lower, then there's no way that Oracle, the software player that's borrowing heavily to get a piece of the AI data center market, there's no way that it's going to be able to hold trendline support. So we'd probably move to 120 first, and then potentially even lower. So maybe like 97 or $100. That could be in the cards for Oracle. And take a look at that move straight down. Okay, yields, US 30-year. So this is where we're getting that source of volatility from the move index. Take a look at the speed at which yields have collapsed. And so, if yields are collapsing with the stock market still at all-time highs, that's not a good thing. If the stock market is about to break out to fresh all-time highs, you would expect yields to be pushing higher, but they're not. They're pushing lower. So this is, not a good thing for equities. This tells me we're in a period of risk off. This is risk off behavior. Bonds bid, notes bid, that's risk off. Gold up, that's risk off. So this tells me we could be about to see some real fireworks to the downside out of the stock market. Same thing around the world too. Japanese 30-year pushing lower. British 30-year just collapsing lower. German 30-year pushing lower. French 30-year pushing lower. And honestly, the people in Germany and France, they need to, and Britain, they need to do something about all those illegal engineers and doctors or whatever they call them. Give me a break, man. Okay, the big thing here is the move index, because this pushing higher tells me that we could be about to see the S&P really just roll over and make a sharp move lower. Okay, let's bring it back to digital assets a little bit. In fact, why don't I just run down through my list real quick so we can take a look at these. SUI, SUI, just putting in a bear flag. Here's the poll, here's the flag. This will confirm down to 37 cents, likely lower. I might be a buyer of SUI starting at 37 cents, but I mean, you probably have an opportunity to buy it at maybe 7 cents or something like that. So I am short SUI. XRP. XRP, I don't know what this one does. Like, what's the point of XRP? How is it even a thing anymore? The only reason this is still a thing is because those guys over at Ripple Labs have just been dumping on retail. And that Judge Torres, what she did is she made it illegal for XRP, for Ripple Labs, to sell XRP to institutions, but she made it legal for Ripple Labs to dump XRP on retail. So, wow, pretty awful. And this thing, all these guys have done is sell their tokens, dump on retail to build a treasury. And now they're using that to buy companies, but they don't actually ship products. So, Ripple, I wouldn't be surprised if it's some type of, some type of scam. I can't quite tell what it is, but it doesn't pass the smell test for me. So I think XRP probably moves down to 76 cents and then eventually down to 30 cents or lower. But if this one went to zero and it was found out that it's some type of fraud, that would not surprise me at all. Maybe 10 cents for XRP this bear cycle. I think that's about in line. ARB, ARB. So Arbitrum put in a pretty decent bounce. It really did, but gave it all back. And so if we just zoom in here so we can see this a little bit more clearly, this bounce out of ARB, big bounce, gave it all back. And it wouldn't surprise me to see this, trading for like 2 or maybe 3 cents down here over the next couple of months. So I don't think there's any reason for this to exist. It doesn't provide any value to anyone for any reason. And these tokens, this is just a layer 2 token, kind of like OP. For what purpose? This thing probably goes to 2 cents. Let's take a look at OP. So optimism, OP. After Coinbase said, hey, you know what, we're going to shift away from the optimistic stack on our base chain. OP just got dumped hard. And that was actually the October 10th crash. But there was another one here recently. So OP, let's zoom out to a weekly from a daily. And this is just continuing to plumb fresh low after fresh low, trading at 11 cents. I mean, maybe you can get short this thing down to a penny, you know? Why not? This is a valueless token that exists for no reason. So probably going much, much, much lower. And we're basically like in the early innings of the bear market right now. So since we're in the early innings of the bear and we're just now starting to see Bitcoin get close to its 200-week moving average, if I just throw down that 200-week right here, Bitcoin's just starting to get close. But if it breaks, or once it breaks, all of those alts are just going to get sold hard. So speaking of alts that should get sold, let's take a look at Aave. AAVE with its Aave token. Very, very useful protocol, as a basically like a neobank, a decentralized neobank. But the token itself, maybe not all that useful. So I'm thinking that $46 for Aave makes sense to me. And it could even push lower than that. But, I might be a buyer at the lows from last bear cycle. Although I'll probably wait and buy Bitcoin and buy more Bitcoin first. More Bitcoin. I'm buying the Bitcoin before I'm buying any of these alts. Here's BNB. So BNB is likely going to move down to its 200-week moving average after it breaks below this level of trendline support. Now, if it makes it down to its 200-week and Bitcoin breaks its 200-week, there's no way BNB is going to be able to hold it. So I would expect it to move down into no man's land and eventually down to $200. Now, $200 is basically the low from last bear cycle. So that would make sense as some support for BNB. But if that fails, then watch out because $40 could be in the cards here for BNB. I kind of doubt that. This is a little bit of a higher quality play, even though I really dislike Binance. I think $200 makes sense for BNB. Here's Arrow. Now, Arrow is another one of these tokens with no value at all. So I would expect this thing to probably dump down to at least 13 cents, probably over the next couple of months. But why stop there? This is just a reward token. This is a valueless reward token. And the only reason that it hasn't gone to zero yet is because of that Aerodrome DEX and the partnership with Coinbase. So this is the reward token for that Aerodrome DEX. And, break 27 cents and it goes to 13, 14 cents in a hurry. And the reason for that is the ascent was so quick. If we just zoom out here a little bit and take a look at what happened after Coinbase announced their investment in Aerodrome, it was a straight up move. It was just a straight up parabola. So this, if Arrow breaks 27 cents, which is the horizontal support, then it would be a straight move down, just like this was a straight move up. So it would just go straight down to like 13 cents. But why stop there? At 13 cents, I think you might get some real capitulation and you might see Arrow trading for like, a couple of cents. And I think that would be in line with what Arrow should be trading for. Because you take a look at other competing tokens like Black, if we just take a look at the Black token, that's for the black hole protocol. Let me see if I can grab this contract. That'll work, hopefully. Yeah. So this is kind of what I expect out of Arrow. This is just, trading for a penny now. And it probably goes even lower. Just add zeros here for this Black token. Just add zeros. So 0.01, that's a penny now. How about 0.001? And that's, I think, what it should happen because this thing is just extremely inflationary. It's a reward token on those VE33 dexes. And Aerodrome is a VE33 dex. It's just some type of scam incentive system to bootstrap liquidity. There's no reason for this to exist. So I think 33 cents for Arrow, if you can sell it here, that is a bargain to sell the thing here because it's probably going to go to less than a penny. So I'm short Arrow. Could you tell? Let's take a look at Fartcoin. Oh man, I used to like Fartcoin, but not anymore. So this thing's probably going to go down to just a couple of pennies, probably goes to zero, like 0.001 or something like that, like fractions of a penny. This is a meme coin, no utility, just for laughs, part of that Solana casino. So, once this one ends up really breaking 13 cents with some gusto, there's nothing holding it up. So it might go to a penny in a heartbeat. It could just crash. It could just crash down to, a penny, like maybe in a session. So I'm actually short Fartcoin too. Tau, this is actually one of my favorite digital assets here, just because the protocol itself is unique, very interesting, and useful. But this is a bear flag. So if I just go ahead and draw this in, we've got the downslope and then the upsloping flag. That's important that it's upsloping. But that is a bear flag. And if it completes, that would bring Tau down to like $37. So that would be a big move on the downside out of Tau. So watch out on the downside out of Tau. I would actually be a big buyer of Tau down in the 30s. Tron, TRX, this is actually one of the best performers this bull cycle and so far this bear cycle. So Tron, TRX, this thing, put in like a 7x from trough to peak this bull cycle, and it's held on to the majority of those gains. So that's really interesting. And especially if you price it in Bitcoin terms. If we price this thing in Bitcoin terms, if we price this thing in Bitcoin terms, the outperformance just becomes even more clear, especially this bear cycle. So Tron has been the single outperformer in the digital asset space. Let that sink in that, the Tron token has outperformed everything else, like even Bitcoin. Like, what the fuck? it's kind of amazing. So, and it's sitting at resistance in Bitcoin terms. So if Tron breaks out above, this level of resistance in Bitcoin terms, this bear cycle, that would likely mean that Bitcoin is moving to the downside by a greater percentage amount than Tron is. Wow. So speaking of something that should get sold, here's AVAX. And AVAX is one of the worst looking alts out there because it's sitting at its bear market lows from last cycle already. And so when this breaks down, it likely goes to like $3. Down here, this is probably where it goes next. So from $9 to $3 over the next couple of months makes a lot of sense to me. And I kind of like AVAX. I don't know why. I'm not quite sure exactly what this chain does, but obviously if they generate any revenues at all, it's not being returned to coin holders. So this thing, probably you see this with a 3 handle. I might buy some at a $3 price point for AVAX. Why not? Hopefully it survives, into 2027 and 2028. It likely does. So picking it up at $3, probably a bargain. So, the ones that I would buy would be AVAX. I would buy SUI. I would buy Aave. I would buy BNB if it can get down below $200. Definitely buy a little bit of Solana. For sure, buy some ETH, but the vast majority is going to be in Bitcoin. So just watching and waiting to be able to pick up some BTC well below its 200-week moving average, which I think could get tested quickly here. So that 200-week moving average comes in at 58K. I'm short Bitcoin, and I would love to be able to buy Bitcoin below 50K this year. So if I can pick up Bitcoin at 33, oh my goodness, that would be just a dream come true to be able to buy Bitcoin at 33. So I want to go ahead and wrap things up there. I want to thank everyone for joining live. It's always a pleasure to be able to go through these digital asset charts with everyone. And if you find value in any of this, go ahead, check us out at defiuniversity.xyz or school.com/DeFi University. Everyone have a great weekend, and I will see you guys on Monday. Bye-bye now.